Okay, it's 4 o'clock. I'm gonna set.
You guys can hear me okay?
Yeah. I didn't know we were still going to do this though with you in out of town, Pete.
The show goes on, except for next week when I won't be, unless I get good Wi-Fi on the cruise ship.
I think we could skip a week.
It'd be kind of fun. Do it with Alaska.
It's up to you.
Oh, game.
We're live.
We're live.
We're live.
GenXYZ is live from. We're always in a different location.
Parts unknown. Yeah.
Yeah. Today I'm in Tallahassee. Ashley, it looks like you're in Tampa, and Peter, you casually late joining us 30 seconds.
I'm in my normal location though, so.
You have no excuse. But we are GenXYZ. I'm Pete. I'm the Gen Xer.
And I'm Peter. I'm the Gen Y, the millennial. Everyone's favorite.
It's in the same spot. I'm Ashley. I'm the Gen Zer, and at least I move around the house. You know, I put my computer in the living room today to change the scenery.
I got too good of a setup. I can't move it around, unfortunately.
Well, I'm on an iPad, and apparently that makes me yellow. So here we go. So you guys, if you're new to join us, please participate. We love interaction from whoever is paying attention, but otherwise we're going to power through. But the more comments, the better. We'll stop and react to as many as we can. Hope everyone is doing great today, and we are going to talk about something that's really important, which is helping with job search.
Yeah.
Who doesn't need that?
Apparently everyone does.
Everyone needs it right now, it feels like. Especially
Why is that? Why do you guys think it is? I mean, the market is bad. It's not as bad as it's been, although a lot of people keep trying to say that. It's never been worse. Trust me, it's been a lot worse. It's not great, but it's not terrible. Why do you guys think people are having such a hard time finding jobs?
I think, under the best of circumstances, people aren't changing jobs all the time. So it's like it's a skill that gets rusty. So I think best case scenario, people are going to be kind of out of it when they're jumping. I think that coupled with the fact that a lot of companies are slow to hire. So they're getting, candidates are getting ghosted because people they're getting forgot about or they're lost in the system. I think it's kind of a perfect storm. It seems like where they just come together and it just sucks. It sucks for the job seekers right now.
I think it could be a multitude of reasons. One, they get out of college, they have a degree that has nothing to do with the job that they want or see, let's just say on LinkedIn as a post, and they hit apply, they don't have the qualifications for it. Then they're in a crisis, they don't know what to do. Then they have to change completely. I had someone reach out to me the other day. She was like, I'm having a crisis. I don't have background to do marketing, but I want to do marketing. So, and not to mention the whole work from home thing.
Do you think you're talking about young people. So you think Gen Z are they have unrealistic expectations? Is it people coming into the job market are like, oh, I got a marketing degree, a bachelor's in marketing. So I'm clearly the most capable person to get this marketing job.
I just think it's Gen Zers. We've been forced to quickly decide on a career choice. And as soon as we get into the workforce and we see all the careers out there, now we're like, oh, but this job pays this and this job has more availability. And then we start second guessing and want to do other things, but we don't have the capability.
So a quick point on that. This is a little bit of a side, but I'm very critical of the lack of assessment that happens in the educational system, right? We're not assessing aptitude. We're not assessing personality, behavior, interests in helping young people, helping guide them in their career choice. But what's interesting is the tools are available. So even though we're not forcing it, I was on a site through my my youngest high school webpage. They have it's a site called Naviance, and it does a lot of different things for students and helping them figure out what scores they need to get into different colleges. It's a really cool website. And I was surprised to stumble upon a couple of days ago a lot of aptitude tests, but no one's using them. No one's taking them, and that's what I find such an interesting gap is that the potential to assess all of these things and help young people figure out what the right choice should be. That's all there, but it's not forced upon them. So unless they're self-motivated, they're not going to do it. Did you guys know that these things are so readily available?
They're like attached to the college, like the college provided them?
No, it's I don't, the high school pays for the site, I assume, but they have access. It like has their ACT or SAT scores in it from or the time they start high school, and it will match for the particular school where my kids go what colleges the other students got into from previous years based on their GPA. It's like a plot that shows this GPA and this ACT or SAT score can get you into this college. So it's a lot of really good data. And it has these assessment tests on there for free that you can take. And I'm thinking, no, why aren't we doing a better job of promoting these things?
I guess I wonder, like, are they good assessment tests? Like,
yeah,
like
I think so.
That's what I always, because I mean, they had assessment tests. They clearly weren't as good as today back, even when I was in school. And like the issue was always like, it tells me some kind of generic stuff. And I'm like, great, what am I supposed to do with that? Like, it's not like something that you take and it's like, hey, you like, analytical stuff and hands-on, like you're probably better in, I don't know, in IT or something like that, or you're better in sales because you really like people, or like you should consider these industries. And I think that's like when I graduated, there was all sorts of industries that I learned after being in the in the job market that I'm like, wow, I didn't even consider that when I was in college. Like, who knows where I'd be right now? So
yeah, no, I mean,
that's kind of an issue.
I guess that's the state of things as I see it. In most cases, it's, hey, these things are available if you're willing to go seek them out yourself, or just find your own time to do it. But once you're in, like, I don't see high schools and colleges, I'll say forcing, for lack of a better way to put it, right? We force you to learn these obscure subjects. We force you to do homework, but we don't force you to find a path that you're well suited for, which I find bizarre, and we'll continue to talk about until we make an impact there, because there's just no great path for that.
I mean, it's a bit unrelated, but like I'll say as an aside to that, I personally think people shouldn't be deciding what they're going to do, or even when they're that young. I think our society is kind of pushing back, like to the point where like an 18-year-old's maturity and everything today is probably not the same as it was in the 50s when you had to like you could go to war or whatever like that. I think it's delayed. It is like people had like houses in full families and stuff in their like early 20s. That was the norm, previously, and now it's being pushed to maybe the 30s or whatever. And I think that the education system hasn't really like caught up. Like I will encourage my kids, like, take a gap year or two, like go do something. Don't immediately like decide at 18 and you're like, well, I got to stick with this now for the rest of my life.
Or something in my high school, we had like vocational school. So they would spend half the day doing English, math, science. And then the second half of the day, let's just say if you wanted to be a culinary chef, they'd go to culinary school. So it's like I almost wish in high school it was like we had more vocational options, where it's like, you want to see what marketing's like, here's this vocational school that will give you some prep to see if you actually like that. Or if you want to do something computer science related, take this vocational class.
Well, I agree with you. And what Peter said makes, you don't know what you don't know. And so there's professions that very few people know exist, that there'd be a lot of interest in. And where's the supply and demand? Where are things heading? How's technology going to change where the demand will be? And we're doing an awful job of that. And we're not going to solve that today. I think we are on the same page that, yes, that needs to improve, and we'll hopefully tackle that at a later date. But for now, what we're going to focus on is people who are on the job market, right? Too late to find your dream vocation and path, but you're in the real world. You have to figure it out. And what I'm seeing with young people right now is there's this belief that there aren't jobs. There are. There's a belief that there's a lot of fake jobs. So I want to touch on that for a second, because I'm not sure where that's coming from. That is all over social media. Young people saying the jobs aren't real that are posted. And that seems bizarre to me, because companies are paying for these jobs to be posted. There's no benefit to collecting a lot, spending a lot of time recruiting for a position that's not real. What do you guys think is driving that?
I mean, I wouldn't say necessarily fake, but I will admit, I mean, recruiters will post a job, maybe they get mobbed with thousands of applications. So maybe their perfect applicant is in that first batch and they're just working through it. So really it's filled or maybe not real. And they just haven't, they haven't gotten around to taking it down over. So it's really only been up for 2 weeks, but it's been filled in the first couple days because of the amount of applications they get. So I guess that could be considered, fake and a little bit over inflation, where people are then applying to all these jobs that they've already gotten tons of applicants, and the chances of you being seen are very slim. So
I've had my fake job experience when I guess they post a job description saying the job is going to be one thing, and you get to the job, they hire you, and you're doing something completely different. That to me, that's a fake job.
That's more a misleading title. You're saying people are saying that, like, I'm sending my application and it's just disappearing to these jobs because they aren't.
Yeah, there's no job at all, right? Which I think is just not a common thing. Sure, it happens. I think we know that companies will post jobs. I call them pipeline jobs, where we're always hiring for X. We might not hire today, but odds are we're going to be hiring in the next few days, weeks. And so you want to build a pipeline of candidates who fit that criteria. But those are real jobs. Those are just kind of recruiting in advance, building your bench, building your pipeline, whatever you want to call it. But I don't know where the sentiment is coming from. It's almost just spreading on social media. That's, a few people say it and then it becomes true, even though I don't think it is. Where their jobs out there are fake, and we're wasting time applying. I think, Peter, what you said is probably most accurate. That there's just so many applicants. The recruiters stop looking at resumes after they receive 20, 50,
or they
100.
post it. A lot of these people don't realize, like, the way a lot of these job boards is that you post a job and it's up for 30 days, which, like I said, they may find a person in the first week, so it's just up longer than it probably needs to be. But if the recruiter's working on 5 jobs, they might, not get around to taking it down right away. So it stays up there maybe a week or so longer than it needs to, which I guess that lends to, that coupled with the easy apply and the fact that, like, tons and tons of people are applying to one, maybe there is one opening and it gets 1,000 applicants. Like, what do you do there?
Yeah, it's a bad system, but there's a way to circumvent that system altogether. And that's what I know we're going to spend time talking about today. And that's working with recruiters, third-party recruiters specifically, staffing companies, headhunters. They're all the same generally, right? There's some technical differences that I believe exist with those names, since we live in that world. But for people who don't, it all kind of falls in the same category. So Ashley, when did you first realize that industry even existed? As the most recent grad here.
So actually, I graduated, and then my sister's friend, they're 4 years older than me, was also looking for a job. And she used a recruiter. And she got a job at Macy's as a buyer. And that's when I was like, wow, okay, so this happened so quickly. I remember one second she was complaining to us about not having a job. And then a few weeks later, she has a recruiter and she gets an excellent job for a really cool company. And I was like, okay, so this has to be effective. So if I ever struggle, I mean, they're going to get you somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
That's, for me, I realized it pretty quickly that it was,
I don't think a lot of people realize, like, what a recruiter is. Again, that goes back to the college thing. Like, most recruiters I know, by the way, they didn't go to school to be a recruiter. They, like, kind of fell in it because they're like, I'm good at talking to people. I'm good at this. I kind of made my way into it. And a lot of people I talk to, if they're not on the job, they're like, what does a recruiter do? And they'll call, or they'll be like, oh, like, so it's like, do I pay you? And what, like, which is, that's headhunting, the textbook definition, or, if you've got somebody who's going to find you a job. But, like, people don't realize, like, the companies pay these agencies to find hard to fill positions or whatever, because they either can't do it themselves or they've got too many. And I find that that's kind of a common thing, that people just don't understand what a recruiter is, or that they're, what they do. They think it's like, you're like an HR manager, you work for Disney or whatever company, but they don't understand what third party ones are. And I think that's just a lack of education, maybe.
I was making some videos about it, and my daughter said, "Hey, you probably need to define what a recruiter is, because you're saying recruiter, work with recruiters. People don't know what that means. They think that means a recruiter at a company, at a corporate location, and that yes, those are recruiters as well. So." Just a quick explanation from my perspective. And Peter, you mentioned headhunters. So, headhunters to me are I associate with more senior roles, right? The direct hire positions, retained searches, and retained searches are where companies will pay the headhunter, who is a recruiter, to go and find someone in a very niche role, usually, right? But the words really are interchangeable, and so a headhunter is a recruiter, but a recruiter isn't necessarily a headhunter. And what I mean by that is, if you work for, actually, you mentioned Macy's, so we'll just use them as the end user employer in this show today. Macy's has recruiters that work for them directly, but they may work with a third party recruiter. They may call that a headhunter, right? And so all headhunters are recruiters, but not all recruiters are headhunters. That's that's
Also known
not
as
confusing.
executive recruiters. Sometimes they call themselves executive.
Correct. Executive recruiters. What we usually think of, because we're in the industry, is third party recruiters. That's the easiest way to differentiate. But I don't think that necessarily explains what it is to most people. If they hear third party recruiter, it probably lacks meaning too, don't you guys think?
Yeah. I don't think people realize that, like, there's companies that all they do is work with bigger companies to hire for them, and to act as effectively their outsourced recruiting department, finding people.
So so to your point, people are coming out of school. They don't know the industry exists. They don't know that these people are available to help them. But it's the number one thing that I recommend to anyone who's on their job search. There's some basic things that you have to take care of. You have to have, in today's day, an updated LinkedIn profile. That's where recruiters, both corporate recruiters and third-party recruiters, live to find candidates. Right? They spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. So having an updated LinkedIn profile is hugely important, and it should effectively mirror your resume.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen a lot, but that's for a different show. We'll talk about LinkedIn on a different episode. But yeah, that has to be in place. You have to have a great resume, right? That clearly spells out who you are professionally, what you want to do. It has to have the right keywords and phrases that indicates what kind of job you're looking for. Because as we know, recruiters, whether they're corporate or third party, spend very little time looking at a resume to decide whether it's worthy of spending more time. So I think of it as headlines, right? Make sure your headlines really stand out and spark interest. So do those things, right? LinkedIn profile, resume has to be in place. Network, use your network, of course, heavily, but then work with recruiters. So Ashley, if you're coming out of school and you hadn't had that experience with your friend, and someone said, "Hey, Ashley, you really need to work with recruiters," what would be your thought on that? Would that sound natural to you? Would that sound weird? Would it sound like a scam?
I mean, and this is like if I didn't know anything about them in the beginning coming out, I feel like I'd try and go and do research on my own to figure out what exactly I'd be getting myself involved with first. But I would be open to it after I did research and saw like good outcomes and talked to people about it. But I don't know if I'd say yes right away, just because I'd be like, what is that?
Yeah.
So if you're on listening with us, what is your, I don't know, were you familiar with recruiters before you interviewed with Four Corner originally?
No, not really, to be honest. I never had really like had any sort of interaction with the industry. I had recruited for the companies I worked at. And I worked at Target, and I went to job fairs for it to like talk. So like I had done recruiting, but I didn't, and I knew that there was a corporate one. I didn't really know about the third party aspect of it, but I've kind of talked to a lot of candidates, obviously, over the years. And like a great example I'll see is like, we work with a lot of clients who do, they'll do IT, say, and entry level, desktop support, help desk. So we talk to a lot of people who come out of school, obviously, and they can apply on their own and kind of navigate the waters. But it's a lot easier if you write your resume really well and send it over to a good recruiter, and you say, hey, if you're ever doing this, like, this is what I'm trying to break into, because we place people and we help them get their foot in the door all the time at clients, in IT, and people go on to be network engineers, system administrator, whatever, get their foot in the door. And so I see it being really, really great if you understand it. Like, that's the relationship, is the company hires us to find people, and it goes from there. And I will say this for anybody who's watching, like, it gets kind of twisted if it's the other way around. People are like, you work for me, find me, here's my thing, find me a job. If you go into it and you say, I know they're being paid by the company to find a person, like, I'm going to make myself as available as possible, make my resume as easy to read as possible, and present it to them. Say, hey, if you're looking, like, I'm here, I'm easy to find. The people that kind of approach it with that mentality and that open-mindedness do really well. And I've yet to see any of them, like, not really break into a job. Anybody who actually is, like, understands the full process and how to kind of, where they fall in the recruiting order. So that's, I do want to, like, say that, where people are like, they'll call themselves the candidate is the client, which obviously that you want that person to get hired, but, like, the recruiting agency works for the company. They're working on their behalf.
And that is a common misconception. And I know that because people in my personal life for years, having been in the recruiting industry for a long time, will come to me and say, hey, I'm going to send you so-and-so so you can help them find a job.
Yep.
And I'm like, record scratch. That's not what we do. We find people for jobs, not jobs for people. Now, I know that there are some companies that exist. You alluded to it a little bit ago, Peter, where you can pay someone to proactively find a job for you. I don't know anyone who's in that business. I don't know of any companies who firsthand who does that. And I would be skeptical of them for the main reason that you can't create demand that doesn't exist. And so that's why we don't have the ability to find a job for an individual, because the job has to exist first. And if it doesn't, we could be the best at what we do, but we can't create demand if it's
it
not.
works best if you build say you get in the door with a recruiting agency, you build a relationship with a singular recruiter. That's where you can be like, hey, look, I'm looking to move or whatever. Keep your eyes open and you work. But yes, you shouldn't really be paying the recruiter, because they're working with you. Like, if they benefit if you get hired, so it's in their best interest to get you hired. Building that relationship, and when I see people who come off contract and go on another contract and they're working with the same recruiter year over year, that's obviously the best scenario. You've got somebody who's always keeping an eye. It's kind of like an insurance broker, where, like, they'll shop around for you just if you're ever, like, looking for something else. Like, that's the perfect scenario, I think.
Ashley, when you first heard about recruiters, since it was not too long ago, did you think that that they would go out and help you, like, look for jobs on your behalf, or did you have to realize that too?
I had to realize that. Like, I thought they would look for jobs on my behalf. If I was like, oh, I need a marketing job, I'm going to get a recruiter to find me a marketing job. It was up until, like, since, being with Four Corners, I was like, wait a second, that's not how this works. Like, here I was thinking, so for my sister's friend with the Macy's job, they didn't go and find her that buyer job, but, they checked her resume and they, like, recruit her to be a buyer for Macy's. So
That's right. So that's a huge distinction to make, right? And people are going to be frustrated. Like, I've had it over the years. People say to me, "Wow, I trust you," which is great to hear. Of course, I'm only going to work with you, and I'm like, "Hang on, no, that limits your your visibility," and that's. So I want to talk about some of the reasons to work with recruiters, and then talk about how to work with recruiters. And the biggest reason is it's to increase your visibility, to give you more exposure to what's happening in the market. So if you're on your own, you can only do so much. But if you have multiple recruiters working for you, and even though I believe we're the best at what we do, we certainly aren't the only game in town. And even the biggest and best recruiters in any market or industry only have visibility to a very small percentage of the jobs overall. So if you're a candidate, it is in your interest to work with more than one recruiter. How many is subjective, but I'll generally say all the top recruiters in your market or industry you should have a relationship with, because that is increasing your exposure. And these are effectively having agents who are aware of what you're looking for. They're working on your behalf. They're not working proactively, but the more recruiters you have a relationship with, the more opportunities you're going to be exposed to.
Yeah.
And
That's gone a long way. Like, it actually makes me think about things in like my own like life when I realize, like, think about, nobody's doing anything for free. And that's the world. Like, how do they get paid? They get paid on commission. Therefore, they are being paid by the company. It's in their best interest to give the company a good candidate who's going to get hired. That's you in this scenario. And so I alluded to like insurance agents. I literally asked them, like, how do you guys get paid? Like, oh, we get commission from, whatever agency. And that's not something I thought about when I came into it. Is like, oh, they work for me, or, whatever. Like, why would they work for you? For free? For what? The goodness of their heart? Like, you always have to kind of, if you understand that, then you can play to your advantage and say, okay, I'm going to work with, like you said, the 3 best recruiters that I trust. And you know that each of them is motivated because they're working in that capacity to get me hired in that role. And therefore, I've got a better chance. So.
I think another misconception, or I guess this is what I thought, when a recruiter finds a job for you, your paycheck, a percentage of your paycheck, every time you get a paycheck is going to go to the recruiter. Is that true?
Yeah, no. Well, so yes and no. So there's 2 ways generally. There's lots of varieties of this, but generally speaking, there's either what we call direct hire, where from day one, the candidate who's hired will be on the payroll of the end user employer. So in those cases, most of the time, the recruiter gets a fee. It, again, most of the time is a percentage of the annual salary. So if that your annual salary as a candidate is 60,000 versus 50,000, and the recruiter's getting a fee as a percentage of that, they're incented to get you as high a salary as
they want to give
right?
you as much money as possible.
And it's worth noting they want you as a candidate to be happy, right? There's sometimes people, not all recruiters are good, right? There are some shady people out there, organizations, just like any industry. Most are very good, and because if you want to be in this industry for any period of time, you have to have a reputation built on trust and reliability, and so you also have to deliver consistent, high quality. And so, Ashley, if you're our candidate, I want you to be happy. I want you to accept the job. I want you to be happy showing up. I want you to stay, because if I do something like you told that story earlier, I tell you the job is one thing and you show up and realize it's another, you're not going to stay. You're going to leave. And I'm sure you immediately left that situation. So no recruiter who's worth anything would do that to a candidate and do that to their client, because they wouldn't have a client for very long if they did. So that's what we call direct hire placement or direct hire recruiting. And then the other most common way is contract recruiting, contract staffing, where the individual is on the payroll of the recruiting firm working at the end user client. And in that case, the recruiter's profit is a rate above what the individual is getting paid as a contract employee. And that difference between what they bill the company and what they pay the individual working is how they make a profit. So it's not a cut of their weekly paycheck as much as it is a markup on top of that. So, okay,
Yeah.
that was a lot of rambling. Did I explain that clearly enough, Peter?
That makes sense.
Well, you also, like, people are like, okay, well, why? It's not. Oh, by the way, it's not all profit. There's operating expenses for the company, obviously, but it's also like your payroll taxes and all that type of stuff. Like, if you're working at Google and you're actually a contractor for another, Google's not paying any of your payroll taxes to the government stuff. The recruiting agency is, so that's why it's usually the margin above that. But yeah, it's not here. They're not taking any of you. And even in that case, like Pete said, like they want you to be happy. Like, you want repeat customers. You want to look good to your client. You don't want to have people flaking out and leaving the next day, in which they're going to do if you're, kind of, putting them in a bad situation or not paying them what they want. That's actually one of the things we've always told recruiters, like, don't try to like sell them on a certain pay rate. Like, ask them what they need. What is the amount that you feel comfortable at? Because that's where you need to be. Like, I don't need to like undercut you and sell you several dollars short more an hour, and then you're just going to be looking around for the next great thing. Like, they want you to stay at your job because longevity is the best thing for them.
Yeah, and on that point, my advice to candidates is always be as open as you possibly can with the recruiters. Let them know what your motivations are. Let them know what compensation will make you happy. I mean, the more information they have about what you really want, the better their results will be for you. So,
how do you feel, since you brought that up? How do you feel about, like, I always hear and I see on Reddit, they're like, don't tell the recruiter how much, like, let them tell you how much the position pays. Like, how do you? I've always said, like, it's exactly like, tell them what the amount you want is, because honestly, if you're making 50K, but you're like, I need 70 to move, it really doesn't matter that you're making 50 right now. 70 is your number. That's where you got to be at. So tell them, I need to be making 70K for me to move. I'm not gonna, I think that's important. Like, just be honest with like what makes sense in your life. Everyone's got their own, circumstances. How do you feel about like that
yeah,
versus like making the first move kind of thing?
Well, since we're specifically talking about third-party recruiters, I'll answer it from that perspective. And again, same answer, really. Give the recruiter your honest situation and say, here's the minimum that I would consider.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you'll take a job at that rate. It just means you won't consider anything below it. And that's the easiest way to give. So then the recruiter says, it's like shopping for a house, right? What's your budget? Well, I can't pay above X. All right, well then I'm not going to waste my time on other things. And so if you try to play a game with the recruiter, they're not going to know what to do with that, right? Well, it depends. It depends on what. It depends on. I can't, as a third-party recruiter who's trying to find the right candidate for a job. The more information I know about what the individual candidates who I have relationships with are looking for, the better I'm going to serve them. And it's just the way it works. So,
Bella literally said, she literally told a candidate today, I'm your advocate. Tell me where you're currently at and what you need to make a move. That's the perfect way to phrase it. Like, you can say like, here's the minimum I need. I would much rather be, here. And then they can kind of work. Because if you say I need, and you just give some astronomical number, they're going to be like, all right, well, he's out because he's clearly, not even in this range. And you're like, well, I was willing to take 10,000 less than that. I just didn't want to stay that.
Yeah, I think when you are, and that's the reason why Bella has so many 5-star reviews from the candidates that she works with, because she means that, right? And she's there to do the best job for them that she can. But there's this when you're in the recruiting industry, as we are, you don't get talking about compensation isn't weird. Everywhere else in the outside world, talking about compensation is kind of taboo, right? You don't go around, you'll tell everyone what you do for a living, but you don't back that up and say.
That was the weirdest thing when I started. I was like in my 20s, and I was just like talking to some VP, like, so how much money do you make?
Yeah. And it is weird when because it's such a taboo thing in normal life. When anyone who gets into the recruiting world, I always tell them right off the bat, you have to get comfortable talking about uncomfortable things, right?
Yeah.
Because the more personal, intimate we get about that, the better our relationship's going to be. And it is odd to have that you've known someone for 5 minutes, and I'm talking about how much they make for a living, right?
Yeah.
That is unusual in normal life. So let's kind of move past this, you guys. So we talked about being exposed to more openings as a reason to work with the recruiter. Another reason, a very obvious one to me, is knowing the business as I do, is that it gives you the ability. It keeps you from having to stand in line and being a resume in the pile. I guess that's the best way to phrase it. So recruiters deliver candidate resumes directly to the person scheduling interviews or doing the hiring. We don't, as a third-party recruiter, as you said earlier, Peter, we only get paid if we're successful. Well, we're going to spend our time very wisely. And if we are working with a company where they're not responsive to the candidate resumes we sent over, or we feel like they're collecting resumes from all over the place, like candidates experience when they just apply online, we're not going to work with them, right? That would be a terrible expenditure of our time. So we deliver resumes directly to the person who needs it. We generally deliver one at a time for one opening. So it vastly increases your odds of success as a candidate when you're working with a third-party recruiter. I mean, that is just an indisputable fact as far as I'm concerned, but something that people don't necessarily realize from the outside looking in.
Yeah, and having that relationship is it's crazy how I tell people like being professional and easy to work with and responsive is like that will like put you so far ahead. Assuming everybody's got the same X, Y, and Z skills for a job, like just the fact that you're pleasant and you answer phone calls promptly and turn things in when you say you're going to do, like that, a recruiter will love that. Like because we deal with so many candidates across the board. Like I've had people ghost me. I've seen, so we've seen it all. So being easy to work with and being easy to reach and, agreeable and open with your recruiter, like that's going to make them want to work that much harder for you to sell you to the manager. Having somebody on, actually selling you versus just being a flat PDF, or piece of paper or whatever, that's huge. Like,
and also will like speed up the whole process for you entirely.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. They work fast. I think that like, I've seen recruiters, they'll send someone over at the end of the day, they'll text the candidate, hey, can you interview tomorrow? Like, so being able to understand that and have that relationship is great. Like,
that's a great point, Ashley. And it's something that I wasn't planning on bringing up, but I'm glad you did, that our turnaround time is measured entirely differently than an end user company where big employers will. I've been doing this a long time and I'm still like appalled when I hear how long their time to fill is for a job and what's considered acceptable, what no one gets upset about. Well, as long as we fill this job in the next 60 days. 60 days, when I hear that, you may as well tell me 60 years. That sounds like an eternity, where our recruiters, as a third party organization who's not paid unless we're successful, we look to turn around jobs within hours at times, days at most. If we start talking about a time frame longer than days, my eyes start to glaze over because that sounds like a quick way to go out of business. And so we have to move fast. And to your point, Peter, that's where the recipient of our candidate resumes have to be willing to move fast too, because otherwise we'll lose candidates. We can't afford to do that. So we need response. We're responsive. We need the candidates to be responsive, of course, but we need our clients to be responsive too, or the system breaks down pretty quickly.
Yeah, finding out if somebody is serious is like one of the first things a good recruiter is going to do. Like they're going to, just like you should make sure that they're legit. I mean, you said there's some recruiters who are shady, like in any industry. Like you're going to do your due diligence, like, and find out their background, their credentials, whatever. They're going to do the same thing to you. They're going to make sure you're serious. You're not, wasting their time, because they don't get paid unless you take the job and actually start working. So if you're just kind of playing around with them, that's gonna look bad on you. So it goes both ways.
So Ashley, did any surprise, or did you know all that already?
Again, the whole payout thing, that I didn't know that. So when you gave me that explanation, that made a lot more sense, because I always wondered, like, okay, so where does this money go? How does that process work? Everything else, I was pretty familiar with.
It's kind of, the job industry, talking to recruiters is huge. And you mentioned it earlier too, like just making yourself available, like making your resume easy to read. That's how many people have you talked to that you're like, what? I can't tell what you do. Like, I can't tell what you're trying to do. Like making your resume so that somebody can skim through it in 30, 20, even 10 seconds and easily say, this is a, software developer. This is an architect. This is a whatever. If you're jumping all over and your resume is kind of weird format and it's hard to tell like what your career path is or what you're trying to work towards, they're gonna move on. They're looking for somebody who is it's very clear so that they can easily sell that to
Well,
the manager.
I can imagine, like, let's just say the next step is they're asking you, okay, what is your availability for an interview? And you take forever to respond to that recruiter with availability. It's like, that's just going to slow things down. That's not going to help you. The recruiter is ready to set things up for you, and you're just taking forever to respond.
Make it easy for the, by the way, this works for corporate recruiters too. Make it easy for the recruiter. That goes resume. That means getting in contact with you. That means scheduling things with you. If you're difficult, like that, how many people, it's like being difficult is the worst thing you can do. And people don't realize that they're being difficult.
I think if you're going to work with a recruiter, you need to have everything figured out beforehand. So that way, when you're ready to work with one, it's easy for both parties.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah, that's huge. And people tend to overcomplicate resumes. And I use this analogy a lot. I'm sure I've used it on here multiple times. I always equate it to the magazines at a checkout counter in a grocery store. And I don't even know if People Magazines is still published as a hard copy or if it's just online now. But that's the one that I always think of where I see the headline, the picture grabs me. Not that you should put your picture on a resume, but I see the headlines and it's there to catch my interest. It's there for me to reach over and pick it up, and there's a good chance I'm going to buy it if I do. And that's what a resume is. It's your opportunity to entice the reader to want to know more. What's inside? It is the cover of a magazine, the cover of a book, however you want to call it. And so you should write it as if someone is going to be skimming headlines, because that's all they're going to get. And if the headlines aren't interesting and they're not clear as far as what you're never going to read a People Magazine headline and go, I wonder what they're trying to tell me. This is confusing. This doesn't make sense. It's there to entice you and give you just enough to want more. And that's really what a resume is.
Yeah.
That's all a resume needs to be, right? It doesn't need to be a fancy format. It doesn't need to be, and it shouldn't be on colored paper or with grids or any of the goofy stuff that people like to do. It needs to be enticing headlines.
Yeah. Your resume is to get them to look at you and call you. Like, that's the entire point of it. I don't need to know your whole life story. I just need to know that you can do this job. You've got you're in the realm that I'm looking for, and that it's clear and concise. And then when I call you, you need to pick up or call me back, whatever, be responsive. Like, that's people overcomplicate the job process. And I think, like you said, it's because they're not in it all the time. They don't understand. If you're on the other side, you're like, well, I'm not, I was doing whatever. I'll get back to them when I get back to them. You don't think about, well, the recruiter's probably calling you and 10 other candidates for this job. So you're missing out by not calling them back, or by, I'll get back to them tomorrow, not realizing that they move in days, not like weeks,
So back to working with recruiters, since that's what we promised to talk about today, I do want to talk a little bit about why now, and have we sold anyone listening yet? I'll ask you guys this before we move on the benefits of working with a recruiter. Have we left anything obvious out?
I think we're pretty clear. I mean, you're opening up your opportunities. I can't think of anyone who would choose to not do it, with a reputable recruiter.
especially if you're trying to find a job quickly.
Exactly. Yeah. If you're trying or break into a new industry or get your first job, like it's great for that,
Right. So they have exclusivity a lot of times. They have jobs you won't see. There's people who are you're covering the bases for you. So the more recruiters that you have relationships with, the better. It'll increase your speed, and they take your resume right to the person who matters most, and they don't stand in line. Mm-hmm. So, all right. So we've sold you on that. Now, where do you begin? There's a couple areas that I think you can find the top recruiters. The American Staffing Association, anyone who's part of ASA adheres to a certain high standard of working, and so you're getting someone good if they're part of the American Staffing Association, and you can look on that website and sort by industry and location. Also, a company called Clearly Rated gives candidates of staffing companies, recruiters, as well as their clients, the ability to rate them. So you could go to clearlyrated.com, search by location, and find the top staffing companies in your area and industry. And then Forbes recently put out a list of the top recruiting firms in America. We of course are on it, which we're happy to be for, again, I'll say. And you can also sort by geography there. So between those three sources, you can find great recruiters. Peter, the first thing I recommend is connect with those folks on LinkedIn, right? Find the companies, connect with their local recruiters, and then call them. You've got to call them, connect to you. That's a lost art. Too many people rely on LinkedIn messages and emails, and I'm just not a fan of that. If you want to catch someone's attention, you've got to do more than that.
I think the one caveat I will say to that is if you're going to do that, make sure you've done the other things first. Make sure you have a good resume. Make sure that you actually match the types of jobs that they've got open. You know, those, if you're calling and you're like, I want to be a bookkeeper, and you're calling an IT staffing company, they're going to be like, okay, what am I supposed to do with that? Like, great. Well, like, I'll talk to you, but like, I don't have any bookkeeper openings, nor have we had any in a long time. But if you match their industry, you know, there's a good chance that they've either got something open right now, or they will have something open in the coming weeks. And if you're pleasant, you're easy to talk to, you're easy to kind of make an impression on them, I guarantee you're going to get, you know, your resume is going to get saved for the next time that opening comes.
So very important distinction you made. I know Clearly Rated, you can sort by industry. And I believe the American Staffing site, you can also sort by industry. I know Forbes does, and it's just geography. So go to the company's website. Great point. Confirm that they work on the kind of jobs you're interested in. There's recruiting firms that work in the blue collar space exclusively. There's companies that only work in IT, finance. So it's not a one size fits all thing, far from it. But after you've confirmed that, you know, I'm a fan of picking up the phone and calling and saying, I'd like to speak with a recruiter who focuses on finance. If you're a finance person, just want to introduce myself. I want to get in your system. I want you to have my resume and contact information. And that's enough to get the ball rolling and to get on their radar screen.
Yep. Yeah. I think that, and you said connect with them on LinkedIn. That's a really good thing. Having your LinkedIn profile be clean, just like a resume. That's really good. Because I've too many times I've seen people that they want a job, but they don't actually know what they want. They're like, I'm interested in maybe HR or maybe IT or maybe construction. And you're like, those are three different things. Like, narrow it down, then come back. Make it easy.
Especially, I think with LinkedIn, if you have, there's like a special feature where you could put open to work on your profile, and that's how recruiters will also find you.
How do you feel about that, Pete? I know that's kind of a thing. Like, people are like, oh, it makes you seem desperate. You know?
Oh, well, so that's also an important distinction. The open to work for recruiters isn't the green banner. You see that visibly, but there's behind the scenes a box you can check to show that you want to be contacted by a recruiter. So I think people who use that open to work banner are people who are laid off, unemployed, where they don't mind telling the world that they're on the job market. But there's a much more subtle way to alert recruiters, which is in your profile. You edit your profile on LinkedIn to check that you're looking, and recruiters will contact you that way. Look, I could argue either side of the green banner. Truth be told, I don't think about it a whole lot. I'm neutral on it. I mean, I see both sides of the argument, to be quite frank, and I know there are historically. When you're a recruiter, the goal is to find passive candidates. Why? Because those are the candidates who are gainfully employed, right? They're probably doing well where they are, and you want to entice them to move. If someone's unemployed, yeah, there's that perception exists, right? Why are they unemployed? Is there a problem? Is there baggage? Why? And we know that in many cases there's not, of course, but I know that it exists. And so because it exists, it's not my opinion that matters. I would want to present to any candidate the facts as I know them to be, that there's a stigma associated with it. There's some recruiters who will downgrade you for that. Whether they should or not is irrelevant. They will. So because of that, I think you should consider whether you want to put it on. What do you think about that?
It depends on the strength of your profile and your resume. I think if you've got a strong enough one, then it's great and it does help. Yeah, I guess I could go either way too, because I just see whenever if people are struggling a lot, and there is plenty of times where it's someone got laid off and it's all legitimate and whatever, but there's also other times where it's like, well, why have they interviewed for 17 different jobs but they couldn't land a single one of them, and they're working with recruiters. So take a hard look at your own profile and your own entire big picture. I think that's a really good piece of advice. I've talked to some recruiters who will say that, like, look at how a hiring manager sees you, or how another recruiter would see you, and in an honest way, because a lot of people look at themselves like, I'm great. I don't understand why can't the recruiter follow that I've jumped from this to this to this, and had this time off or whatever, because they don't know you. They're looking at a piece of paper. They can't follow that. They don't know that you did this and you were working or whatever. So I think that's being honest. When you look at your profile, when you look at your resume, that goes a long way.
Do endorsements on LinkedIn also help impress recruiters? It's almost like a form of.
I think so sometimes. I mean, I've looked at them, and if I see that they've got a lot of, say it's a technical skill, and they've got a lot of them, I'll be like, all right, well, they clearly worked in this industry. They know a lot of people that do.
I never really.
It's not make or break for me.
I never really understand those endorsements though, because I had some random person I didn't know endorse some things on my LinkedIn profile. So I'm like,
I guess.
Yeah, they're not something that I put much thought into either. Look, they
do show up. I will say, when a recruiter searches, like, those skills will make you show up in different searches. So having skills relevant to the job that you've done and that you want to do, like, is important. But yeah,
if you can get those, that's a good point. Where it'll help in your search. Anything that'll help you in your search, you show up in a search, is valuable. Generally, I don't think any recruiter will not call you because the open to work isn't there, right? They may not call you because it is. That is, I think, a fact. However, there are people in your network who may see that if you have the open to work banner, to think, wow, I didn't know Peter was looking. I'm going to reach out to him. He may be a great fit for this thing I have in mind. So it's not about recruiters to me as much as it is about signaling to other people. But again, I wouldn't recommend against it. I wouldn't recommend doing it either. I generally try to just let people make their own decisions on that.
And the same thing with endorsements. I think nobody's going to care. I think if I'm on someone's profile and I scroll down and I see they've got a bunch of them, I mean, it's great. But I care more if I'm looking for a job. It's an architecture job, and I want somebody who's worked in on hospitality. They designed hotels. I'm going to look for that specific word hospitality in there. Like, if that skill is there for a recruiter, like, that's going to be more important than if they've got 25 endorsements for it. Now that's great, it goes above and beyond, but that's the bare minimum, I'd say there. Like, having specific skills to by the way, as I'm saying this, I'm thinking, like, whatever industry you worked in, put that on there, because a lot of companies will specifically ask for, I want a person who is a software developer or whatever, but they've worked in this specific industry. And that's the differentiator. If you've worked in healthcare or you've worked in hospitality, like I just said, like, those are things that get asked for that maybe people don't realize. They're like, oh, well, I've worked in the hospitality industry doing IT for a long time. Companies care about that.
Yeah, no doubt. Some more than others. So, but you should definitely leverage that where you can. All right. So, how do we end up talking about LinkedIn profiles? We're supposed to be talking about working with recruiters today.
Well,
connecting with recruiters is number one thing.
Yeah, it's pretty big.
That's true. And that from a LinkedIn standpoint, I believe very much today, whether this changes in the future, we'll see, that it's the most important platform to be on to be found by recruiters. And that's as important as anything else. You want to proactively connect with them, sure, but the better your profile, the better your resume, the more you're going to be found by recruiters, which to me is the real goal of a job seeker, right? To be found versus having to do anything proactively, because it's just always more difficult and time consuming.
Yeah, putting yourself out there and having someone reach out to you. They're a lot more knowledgeable. Somebody who works in the industry, whether it's a corporate recruiter or a third party recruiter, it's better to have them reach out for specific roles than for you to go down the list and apply. Now do that too. I mean, spread out your chances. To apply to jobs, don't just wait. Take a proactive approach. But yeah, I think make yourself available, make yourself easy to be found. That's what I've told friends who are like, how do I get, I don't want I want to get another job or whatever. Like, okay, make it easy to find you. Put your resume out there, put it on job boards and stuff. Like, connect with, the right people in the industry. Like, that's the first thing I would do, honestly, before even applying to jobs.
We talked a little bit about the need to be open and honest with recruiters. Bella kind of backs that up, and that candidates worry about being ghosted by recruiters because of their past experiences. Recruiters worry about being ghosted by candidates in the same way. It's everything that exists on the job seeker side of the equation. There's a mirror. It's kind of like a mirror. It exists on the recruiting side of the equation. It's from a different perspective, but it's the same things. We're trying to find the right fit. We're trying to find people we can trust and rely on and like working with. We're trying to avoid bad situations, right? We're trying to be treated professionally and with respect. So if you take that approach and you buy into what I just said, that recruiters have the same fears and motivations, and they want to see the positive outcome, you'll have a lot better experience without, be skeptical, right? That's fine. But also be transparent.
Yeah, I agree with that.
100%.
All right. So what else? Do we miss anything obvious before we go today on working with recruiters? I think I could talk for days about it for sure.
Well, if you're currently looking for a job,
yeah, reach out to us.
Yeah. Look, look at our job openings, look at our website, see the type of positions we work on, and we're not for everyone. We get leads from clients that come in through our website, ask us to work on positions that in a space we don't operate in. We refer them to someone who's better at that. So it's definitely not a one size fits all. If you have a relationship with a recruiter already, expand it. Don't rely just on one or even two. Cover the bases as best you can, and then that'll give you the best chance of success.
Yeah, that's really all you can do. And show if you have a good recruiter that you work with, show them some love. Leave them a review and let them know that you appreciate them, because that it does go a long way. I mean, it's a lot of times candidates are like, oh great, I got a job, moving on. Like, they don't recognize the recruiter put in work and took a gamble on you as a candidate. So it's always nice to feel appreciated. So.
Also, leaving a review, it also helps other people to know, like, hey, this recruiter is really good to work with. So not only are you doing
everybody goes and reads, Google reviews and stuff for businesses. Like, everybody does it for every business, and recruiting's no different. So
absolutely. Also a good place to find local recruiters.
Yep.
Look at their Google reviews. So they tell a pretty good story.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. All right, you guys. Well, we'll sign off for this week. Goodbye from Tallahassee.
Goodbye.
Right. And Orlando.
All right.
Bye, guys.
See you next week.